2, 1. Okay. We are live, the Florida Texas postgame show here at Florida, the voice of college football. We have a new co-host on the show, Tyler Natuno. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey guys, Tyler Natuno. Currently work as a managing editor, USA Today Sports, College Sports Wire. But I'm a lifelong Gator fan based out of Jacksonville. Went to UF, graduated in 2020. So yeah, I'm excited to be on the show, despite the product that this team continues to put out on the field.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you here. Ton of experience. It's going to help me. It's going to help you. It's going to help the show, help us expand our show and everything. But honestly, let's just get into this game. Let's get it over with. The Gators lose 49-17 at Texas. I mean, just a quick, give me your thoughts on this game, Tyler.
I mean, so look, I'll say this. Any hope I had of this maybe being interesting or exciting for the Gators was pretty much wiped out when we found out minutes before the game that Lagway wasn't going to go after going through warm-ups this morning. I will say I didn't expect this. With the strides the defense had been making, the way they played against Carson Beck in Georgia last week. I mean, I expected against a Texas offense that, by the way, hasn't looked this good for most of this season. Had its share of problems. So I thought that, what I thought would happen would be that the defense would come out playing pretty strong and hold them in check. And then it would just eventually get out of hand because the offense wouldn't be able to score well. It was never really in hand in the first place. Defense got absolutely torched, gave up 350-ish yards in the first half. Just extremely disappointing. And I know what the deal is with all the injuries, missing a ton of guys on both sides of the ball. And hard to expect a lot better than this against a team like Texas. But, man, just not what you want to see, when you're trying to fight for a bowl game, trying to fight to build any kind of momentum down the stretch this season.
Well, going into this game, my projections were 27-12. So you could say the offense did better and the defense did worse. I mean, it was a kind of close game early on. Defense made a big stop on the first drive. Offense had a chance to make it a one-score game with like 6 minutes before halftime. And then they just kind of blew it open. I mean, the defense was on the field for so long in this game.
Yeah.
I mean, Texas is going to break one open eventually. Our defense is very bend, don't break. And it's just a point where you can bend so much, and then they finally just break.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of like what we saw last week against Georgia. Kind of saw it against Tennessee too. Little against UCF. But going into the game, I was a bit hopeful that with Scott Strickland announcing that Billy is our head coach. Didn't get specific into that. Actually, we'll get into that real quick too next. But he wasn't too specific in that. That maybe the team will do something to keep it close, whether it's the defense or the offense surprising us. But no, it really wasn't either of them. And Texas just blew it open, and then, yeah, it was never a question. What do you...
Yeah. Sorry, no, what were you saying?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying on that point, piggybacking off your point about that statement, yeah, never explicitly mentions the words 2025 or the word 2025 in that statement. So, yeah, definitely curious. That's all I was going to add.
Yeah. I mean, there was also a lot of Florida basketball news yesterday.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder how much Strickland is also on the hot seat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he releases that statement 2 days ago. Then yesterday, the whole Todd Golden, I don't want to get too much into that, comes out. Heard that Strickland has known about this. And it happened last year, and Strickland still extended Golden. It really makes you wonder, like, if he was just saying this about Billy as one of his final things, kind of just hoping that it works out for Billy and to build some momentum for this fan base and really just give the team anything. Right now, the entire program kind of looks bleak, especially when you look at this game. I mean,
yeah, across the board, really in the athletic department right now, given what happened yesterday, which, like you said, we don't really want to get too into the weeds on, but, I will say this about it. the timing is a little bit murky because it came out. The Title IX complaint was filed in September. Whether that was when they learned about it for the first time, we don't exactly know. But the point being, I would say, is when that happened, it immediately made me not put quite as much credence into that statement that Scott Strickland put out earlier this week, because I think, ultimately, I think his job could be in jeopardy. I mean, he's, now overseen, several scandals involving treatment of women on campus. And it's, it's in addition to what's happening with the football program. I don't know where that leaves Scott Strickland. Now, obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty on campus right now, interim president, interim, leadership across the board. So it's kind of in a time period in flux for the University of Florida beyond just the athletic department. So that's why I don't know how quick anything would move on that front. But I think I would say that the long-term future is a lot more in question as we stand right now than I would have thought maybe a few days ago.
Going into the season, a lot of people would have said that if Billy does bad and bad enough to be fired and gets fired, Scott Strickland also wouldn't last. That Billy is really Scott's last hope. Now you also have the basketball news coming up. I mean, let's just get into the game. It's kind of depressing, really.
Yeah.
So Texas starts off with the ball. We play our defense a lot like how we did against Georgia. Soft coverage, kept everything in front of us. They got into the red zone pretty easily. But then TJ Searcy on a big third down gets a sack. Forces a 51-yard field goal from Texas. They miss it. I know during that drive, I already kind of felt the dread coming in. I was like, oh no, this is how this game's going to go. And then we get them to miss the field goal. I actually had a boost of hope in this game that, okay, this defense is going to keep us in it. And what did you think? Did you have any sort of moments like that when that happened?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that opening drive, when they go down the field and you miss a field goal, you kind of start thinking internally, at least I did, like, hey, maybe we're kind of seeing a replay of the Georgia game. Like the defense is going to, like you said earlier, bend but not break. And we're going to get some, some fortune on our side with whether it was, the turnovers last week from Carson Beck or the missed field goal today. But beyond that, I mean, I think after that first drive, you kind of stopped seeing any of that. I mean, they gave up some explosives, which I think they've done a pretty good job this season of avoiding, or at least in recent weeks, but gave up some explosive plays and just, complete inability to do anything, and obviously the offense having quick possessions wasn't helping anything early in the game. I will say, like, kind of impressive that they were able to have any rushing success at all beginning of the game, knowing Texas practiced all week to stop the run. Like they knew how one-dimensional Florida was going to be in this game if DJ Lagway didn't suit up. So, credit to the run game for being able to do that early in the game, but just, with Aiden Warner playing the way he was today, it wasn't going to happen. And it didn't happen offensively until the game was pretty well in hand.
Yeah, because we finally get the ball. It actually is a decent start. First play is a screen play to Aiden Mizell, then a 9-yard run to Jaden Ball. You get a first down, and then, negative play on a run, negative play on a pass, and then just a third and long, just don't turn the ball over. Let's get the defense back out there, screenplay. Then we punt it again. We end up getting a sack. Or no, we don't get a sack. We almost get a sack on Ewers on 3rd and 10. But Ewers somehow gets out and gets 9 yards, gets them to a 4th and 1 in their own territory. They decide to go for it. They actually have a really creative play call here, like double end around reverse. I don't even. They get it.
Billy's going to steal that at some point. He is.
Oh, for sure. And it ends up resulting in a 44-yard run for Isaiah Bonds, which then led to a 30-something yard pass from Ewers, which I believe was a busted coverage from Jordan Castell, if I'm thinking of the right play here. The defense. You would have liked for them to get another stop. They had him at a 4th down. If kind of get gutted on 4th down like that, you can give them a little bit of an excuse there.
Yeah.
I'll give them the rest of the game to prove it. I still had a little bit of hope here. I mean, what were you thinking after they got the touchdown?
I mean, I didn't think that the defense was going to completely, just collapse the way that it did later in this game. But I would say, the warning signs were there. I mean, yes. Jordan Castell getting burned on that big play, that wasn't the first time that that would happen in this game. So, I just go back to, there were plays early in the game offensively where we could have capitalized and kind of stayed in the game. That play action pass to DK for 30 or 40 yards or something like that. That was a great opportunity early in the game. Then we had a missed field goal of our own. And, so just, it kind of was like the defense was giving you enough early in this game. It wasn't great, and they were getting burned and giving up some big plays, but the down-to-down consistency was all right. If you could have, given them a break and capitalized, on that scoring drive, it was 14-0, I believe, right? When Smack missed that field goal.
Yes, we haven't got to that. That was actually right after.
Sorry, I'm skipping ahead a little bit.
Good.
My bad.
So right after they get that touchdown on 3rd and 15, we do a simple run, just punt the ball, let the defense continue doing its thing. And Jacoby Jackson fumbles and sets Texas up at the Florida 22-yard line.
Yeah.
Which resulted in a 2-play touchdown to Gunnar Helm. That touchdown pass, they were in the end zone before it looked like our defense even moved. I mean, they just had Denson lost, I believe. I believe it was on Denson. And, I mean, the entire defense, this is like they weren't ready for them to snap the ball. It felt like a problem that we saw early in the year. I think there was something very similar against Miami where they snap it and they're just so quick off the line that they score before it feels like we've even moved.
Yeah.
And at that point, that play really was demoralizing. They're up 14-0. Offense hasn't really shown anything. Defense, they got a stop, yes, but the other 2 drives, one being a 22-yarder and then the other being a nice touchdown drive for them. It was not looking good, man. And then you go to your when the missed field goal.
Well, because you start to see the cracks showing. Like again, early in that game, you were getting pressure on Quinn Ewers. You had guys, making some plays to slow them down, but you've now given up a couple big plays and looked out of sorts. And it just, you can't have that if you're going to stay in a game where you're limited and one-dimensional on offense. I almost said hamstrung, no pun intended. But that's just kind of where, it was pretty apparent early in this game that Florida wasn't going to be able to keep up with the way Texas was going to score.
Absolutely. I mean, even after we went down 14-0, and even after we missed the field goal, the next touchdown drive for Texas when they go up 21-0, we have a play of George Gums where he makes a great pass deflection.
Yeah.
But it really should have been a pick, which it's like the offense did have a nice drive, the drive before, which, okay, whatever. If you get the pick here, you're in good field position. You can still get a touchdown. But he drops that pick, and then the Texas offense just goes right down us and goes up 21-0.
And at that moment, when Gums almost makes that incredible play to set up what could have been a scoring possession, you kind of start to think maybe, that paired with the missed field goal, like still maybe we're going to get some breaks to go our way, the way that Carson Beck was throwing the ball to the other team last week. You thought maybe you could force Quinn Ewers into some mistakes, but he was pretty lights out after that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, so 6 minutes left. Texas is at the 50-yard line. The score is 14-0. So it's not over. Florida's going to need the defense is going to have to come up with something. But we end up seeing a play here that's a theme of the rest of the game. A screen pass to the running back Wisner. 50-yard touchdown pass. I mean, we just could not stop screens, whether it was the inability of the defense or the lack of effort from the defense.
Yeah.
This is really where you saw the game just break open, and there was no chance for us to come back really after that. I mean, the next drive, We actually end up having a pretty long drive. We get into Texas territory, and then we're around like the 25, 30-yard line. We get a false start penalty, and then it's like a 3rd and 14. We're at like the 40-yard line or something around there. Still in field goal range, but a long field goal. Before that play, because there was a timeout, I told myself, I just know we're going to get sacked here and end up way out of field goal range. And guess what happens? We get sacked.
And it was a hold because they were at the 31,
right.
the Texas 31. And yeah, so that cost them 10 yards and yeah, pretty much entirely knocked them out of field goal range. So just devastating, mental errors. And that's, you've got injuries all over the place. But that penalty, that was on Austin Barber. That's on a guy that you're relying on to be, one of the leaders and veterans of this team. So it just was across the board, just didn't get the effort you needed to get.
Absolutely. Then that next drive, Texas goes down the field, 45-yard pass and a 32-yard pass. That results in a touchdown. They're now up 28-0 with a couple minutes, like less than 2 minutes left in the first half. It's like, man, it can't really get worse than that.
Yeah.
Well, 2 plays later, Aiden Warner throws an interception, a bad interception to triple coverage.
Yeah.
Just a play you cannot throw. I mean, just take it to halftime at that point. And then Texas goes down, scores, and it's 35-0 at half. I mean, just 6 minutes ago, this game was looking like, hey, Florida could have a 1-score game going into the second half. We get the ball to start the second half too. And just in the snap, we're trailing 35-0. Yeah. It reminds me a lot of the 2021 Florida-Texas game. If you remember anything about that game, that was Anthony Richardson's first start, where the defense kept us in it, and it was like 3-0 with like 4 minutes left, and then you blink, touchdown Georgia, then there was a fumble, and then they scored again. I can't remember. It was 24-0 at halftime, and it was just over. This is kind of how that game felt.
Yeah, I think, and we'll get into how the third quarter started, but I think the middle 8 of this game proved to be pretty devastating for the Gators today. Like you said, I mean, not looking great. You're down 21-0, but theoretically you could still make something happen, and then you just give up 2 very quick touchdowns. And, and like you said, that interception from Aiden Warner, like, I don't want to pile on Aiden Warner too much because, he's a walk-on transfer from Yale. Like, the guy's a double legacy at Florida. Like, he's out there giving it his all. It's just, frankly, like, it's not really fair for him to even be put in this position in the first place. But I think it's pretty obvious that he is just not prepared for this level of football, at least at this moment in time. And I think that interception kind of showed why.
Yeah, coming to Florida, he never started a game at Yale. Yeah. He got injured in his freshman season at Yale. So I'm not sure how we found him, really. I mean, I guess he was a preferred walk-on.
Yeah.
If he's smart enough to get to Yale, smart enough to get into Florida. So I guess he probably just got in that way. And I heard he actually just beat out Clay Millen for the starting job, or for the third string job, which is now the starting job. But then we get out of halftime. 2 plays later, he throws another interception. I mean, coming out of halftime, I was really at the point where I was like, okay, let's just run the ball, try to establish something. Maybe the defense can just hold him out, maybe finish like 35-10, where it's like it was over, but not too embarrassing. But no, we just go out, throw another interception. Then 4 plays later, touchdown Texas, 42-0. This is the point where we're now starting to get into where, is this like the worst loss in SEC play for Florida Gator history?
Yeah, I mean, I really thought the shutout streak was going to end today at that point when they went up 42-0 and Warner had those 2 interceptions. Like, I was like, yeah, we're not scoring today.
I was really the same when they went up 42-0. I was genuinely starting to worry that the streak's going to end. It's been since, what year did they say? 1980.
It's been almost 40 years. I think it goes back into the 80s.
I think 88.
Yeah.
I think that's the number. I mean, we go back and look at the statement from Scott Strickland. At what point do you look at that statement and just have to throw it out the window? I mean, I know Texas.
I was saying, did you see the still shot of Scott on the sideline today with the quote next to his face and him looking on to the product just disapprovingly?
Yeah, really embarrassing. I mean, I got to assume when all the news was breaking yesterday, he was already in Texas.
Yeah.
So I guess that kind of helps him out so he doesn't have to deal with it then. But then you have this happen. Back in 2020, when Texas fired Tom Herman, 3 weeks before they fired him, they made a very similar statement that Scott Strickland made, saying that he's our coach. They didn't say anything about a timeline of keeping him. They just said he's our guy. Very similar situations now. So there would have been about the same time that ours was released, I guess a week after. I mean, we then have a good drive, and we actually get a touchdown. Or no, we kick a field goal first. Sorry. We get to the 5-yard line, and this is the announcers were talking about it. I remember when we got to 4th and 5, they
ridiculous.
Zoomed into Billy right away, and it's just him going, go, go. Like, he was in a hurry to get those points on the board. That was his goal at this point, just to break the score, to keep the streak alive.
Such a perfect microcosm for where this program is at right now. That it was a 4th and 5, a 23-yard field goal on 4th and 5, down 42 points in the second half.
Yeah,
just unbelievable.
It really is unbelievable. I mean, we'll wrap up the rest of this game. Like, don't need to go through it. We end up scoring 2 more touchdowns. One from Jaden Ball and Jacoby Jackson. They end up going for 116 for Jackson, I think, and 84 for Ball. And both end up getting a touchdown.
Yeah, credit to those guys. I mean, they continued to run hard. Sorry, 88 for Ball. 88 for Ball.
Okay.
Each had 19 carries. Credit to those guys. They continued to run hard in the second half against a defense that knew exactly what was coming.
Yep.
And they still managed to get some things going. So that's, I think, if you're trying to look for a bright spot here, that's probably what it is.
It definitely is. I mean, also, Chimere DK, shout to him, 95 of the 132 pass yards from Aiden Warner.
Yeah.
I mean, this wide receiver room, I feel like most of these guys could start for almost any other team in the country. I mean,
and they had to do it with Burke and Tank Hawkins today. Like they didn't have obviously Trey Wilson's done for the year, and they didn't have Elijah Badger either today. So shorthanded beyond just DJ Lagway and Montrell Johnson. Shorthanded, man. When you say them all out loud together like that, it's pretty staggering.
And that's not even including Damian George.
Of course,
the starting right guard, and some depth pieces in Devin Manuel. And that's just on the offense. I mean, then you look at the injuries on the defense. I mean, our top 3 corners were out.
I mean, you got Cormani starting at corner on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, Cormani, we really saw why Cormani's just not ready to play.
Yeah.
There was a play, I think it was in the 3rd quarter, maybe the 2nd quarter. I think it was the 2nd quarter, actually, where Cormani, he's just so small, like his body thin.
Yeah.
And he just gets shoved off. Like, I wouldn't even say shoved. And luckily, you restores a bad ball. So it ends up being, so they don't get the first down. That was really indicative on this team, on the injuries and how it just is not a good look.
No. Yeah, I think Cormani just, I think you can see the athleticism and the potential there. But yeah, I mean, just frankly, like, guy needs to spend a little bit more time in an SEC nutrition and strength program. Like, I think it's kind of as simple as that.
It absolutely is. And I mean, Traquez Bridges, he had to play a ton.
Yeah.
Because, like, we're missing, I saw Turner, so Bridges has been starting. But then Bridges also had to play a corner because we only had 2 corners. I don't know if we saw Jameer Grimesley or Teddy Foster in this game.
I don't think so.
So we played, if I'm not mistaken, just 3 corners.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Denson played corner as well, but he's a normal slot guy. Plays that star position. So how do we look at this game going into next week? How do you look at it first?
Well, I think the one thing I'll say, because I think this game took a lot of the wind out of the sails for me in terms of hoping for an upset down the stretch here because of just the way the defense looked. And I don't know if it's getting better because I don't know if you're getting Devin. I'm not sure when we're going to get guys like Devin Moore back, if we are at all. So, I think you got to kind of, just kind of accept that being shorthanded on defense might not be something that's ending anytime soon. I mean, I think if you're, the fact that DJ Lagway managed to practice this week and was warming up, and the fact that there was even a semi-decent chance he could have played today, I guess would probably make me pretty optimistic that you're going to get him back next week. And if you do get him back next week, I think let's see what can happen against an LSU secondary that has all sorts of problems, as we'll get into on our preview show. But so I think, like, if I'm trying to be positive, it's, you're not going to hopefully be this one-dimensional and incompetent offensively for the rest of the year. I do worry a little bit about, I'm not sure the defense improved as much as we thought it maybe did. Because I think they played some bad offenses, looking at Kentucky and UCF. And I think we got to include Georgia in that right now, based on the way they've been playing in recent weeks. I don't think they're a particularly great offensive unit either. So I think we saw a team today that can really stress Florida in a way that other teams haven't, and it wasn't great. And injuries are part of that too, obviously.
I mean, we can see right now, Ole Miss is up on Georgia 10-7, and they have the ball. The first quarter just ended.
Yeah.
I mean, how good is that Georgia defense, and how good is that Georgia offense? I mean, you might be right. You might be trying to convince me there. Because one thing I want to look at, if you put DJ Lagway in this game, how different do you see this game being?
Like, frankly, like probably 38-21 instead of 49-17. Like, I think if you put DJ in, the offense probably gets a big play to hit early in the game, and it kind of keeps that, probably keeps it a game that you're keeping an eye on going into the second half. But DJ Lagway wasn't, playing defense and wasn't getting torched in the secondary. So, or wouldn't have been, I should say. So I don't think it fundamentally changes the fact that Florida defensively did not have what it needed to win this game. But sure, like, I mean, you had a completely anemic passing offense today. That almost certainly wouldn't have been the case, even if DJ was playing, with limited mobility, which probably would have been the case if he did play today.
Well, you also got to look at, we gave them 2 easy touchdowns on the offense, and then we also had another pick that they got a 1-play touchdown on. So you got to look at, as well as, okay, do those plays happen? Because that could take away some points for Texas. Does he keep the offense on the field so the defense stays more energized? And if it's a close game, I mean, that defense, you can play as hard as you want for Billy. There's just a point where you're exhausted, and there's just a point to where even if you're being hyped up and everything, you just can't keep going anymore. But a guy like DJ to pump you up and to actually put some points on the board. So, I mean, even 21-10 at halftime, that's a huge difference in 35-0. And maybe it just, because the offense gets the ball starts second half, maybe you don't throw a pick. Maybe you drive down the field and get a touchdown or a field goal to make it a 1-score game. I mean, going into the next game against LSU, I've been having trouble of how I really want to identify this, because this game was so bad. But I don't think it's as bad as it would be for next week, because I definitely think the defense is still improved. We gave up a couple big plays to Texas. I do think LSU is a lot more one-dimensional.
Yeah.
Now, where they're one-dimensional is where we've struggled more through the pass game, because Ewers also missed a ton of stuff today. If Garrett Nussmeier isn't missing some things, or if they have a run game, we've seen them have a couple good running games against good teams. It's a really tough thing to look at. I mean, it's going to be a really interesting end to this season.
Yeah, and I think the key in that LSU game is, and not many teams have been able to do this year. Really, only Texas A&M has, but it's get pressure on Garrett Nussmeier. That's an incredible LSU offensive line, though it's maybe not playing quite at the level that people thought it would. It's kept him upright. He's only been sacked twice this year. We'll see how they hold up tonight against Alabama, but and maybe my take will be different tomorrow because of how they play tonight. But A&M was the first team that really got to him, and even if they didn't sack him, they pressured him and caused him to make some pretty erratic decisions. He's a guy that's been pretty smart with the football this year, but has been a little bit interception prone. He threw 3 really bad ones in that game.
He did.
And that was his last time out. So, if you can get pressure on him the way that you did against Carson Beck, I think you can expect to see similar results, because I think they're both prone to force things and try to go hero mode when they shouldn't. I think they both kind of have that tendency. Now, can you do it when, I don't know if the secondary is going to hold up coverage long enough for you to get there, for you to get home? Like, we'll see. And I think a lot of that's just going to depend on the health of those guys. So I think, it's hard for me to say right now exactly how I feel about that LSU game, because I think it's really just going to depend on what that availability report starts looking like at the end of the week.
I do think we got a good amount of pressure early on Quinn Ewers.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is another this Texas offensive line. Before the Georgia game, people said this offensive line for Texas was probably the best in the country. Mm-hmm. Now Georgia demolished that offensive line.
Yeah.
I feel like we definitely had a good bit of success early on in this game. I mean, then by the second half, the team quit. I feel like, I don't know. We did also play a bunch of third stringers that are more backups by the end of this game, so there wasn't as much pressure. But I do think we can see our defensive line get pressure on other teams. George Gums, I still really like him.
Yeah.
We saw TJ Searcy get a sack, which is just like his first of the season. I mean, our play from our outside linebackers this year, I don't really think has been that great. I feel like we've gotten more pressure from blitzes and confusing rather than winning one-on-one, which really is what you're going to have to do to LSU. Because if you just try to put our guys one-on-one with Will Campbell or Emory Jones, it's not going to go well. I definitely see a world where next week we're getting pressure on Garrett Nussmeier. And we're keeping it close with LSU.
Yeah, and I don't think that LSU necessarily. Now, Kyron Lacey is a really good player, and
Absolutely.
Aaron Anderson's made some really nice plays. We'll see what happens with Chris Hilton, who's sort of just getting back into the fold right now. But I don't necessarily think that they have the weapons to stress test the defense quite as much as Texas does.
Absolutely.
So I think that, again, if you can get at least some of those guys back on defense, maybe not all of them, but if you can get back closer to health, I think there's reason to believe you could slow down the LSU offense enough to stay in that game. And if you have a passing component, you can score on them. I think whether that's the case, obviously, will depend on how DJ Lagway progresses throughout the week.
Well, we got Rob here. Billy Napier has 4 plays, and our D-line gets pressure. Never gets pressure without blitzing. LSU will blow us out.
Yeah, I mean, that is the problem you kind of run into when you play a team like LSU, because, Garrett Nussmeier is very capable, despite the fact that he will make decisions, and they get the ball out quickly. So I think it's going to be hard to get home on Garrett Nussmeier. That's why not many teams have.
When we thought that DJ was going to be out for the season, or at least multiple weeks, I said that I think LSU has a higher chance of blowing us out or blowing us out by more points than Texas does. So if I really do believe that statement, then yeah, this could definitely happen. LSU would definitely blow us out, unless, if DJ doesn't play.
Yeah.
Also, going back to Billy Napier has 4 plays. I think we kind of underrate Billy's offense. I feel like we see it do a lot of things right. The run game, I think, has looked really good. Also, with DJ in there, I feel like we kind of forget year one with AR. I feel like our offense had some pretty good stuff going year one, but Anthony Richardson was too inconsistent to run it. And then we saw with Graham Mertz limited with the deep ball, that he couldn't really get it going. But I think with DJ Lagway, and that's kind of his perfect fit on offense, a mobile QB who also has a deep ball. Graham Mertz really didn't have either of those things. And Billy's offense not having as many route runners. And usually on almost every play, Billy has at least one guy going deep. So if you're only running 3 routes, if you're a QB that doesn't have a big arm, you're only going to be able to hit short passes, which will also make it seem like our offense doesn't have many plays. and the D-line never gets pressured without blitzing. I mean, I think that's why we got to blitz a lot. LSU, their wide receiver room has also been hurt. I know Chris Hilton has returned, I think.
Yeah, he didn't contribute a lot in the last game, though, his first game back.
So if they're just looking at like Kyron Lacey and Aaron Anderson, they're two great receivers. We would really need Devin Moore back. I could see a world where they just can't get enough going in the run game to where we can just bring blitzes and keep them in front of us, so where we can kind of play like how we did against Georgia. And because they do get the ball out quickly. So as long as we make our tackles. Rob also. Sark's offensive scheme. Okay. Wide open players. I think that's also a bit on our defense.
Yeah.
We're playing soft coverage. Our kind of goal is to give them space. We're also missing corners. I mean, again, we have two true corners out there. I mean, what do you think of what Rob has to say?
Well, I think so. I'm kind of in the middle of the road on Billy as a play caller, because I think that Billy, I think his offensive play calling and scheme leaves a lot to be desired. I think, I agree with what Rob is saying about Sark. I think Sark is one of the preeminent play callers in the sport. I think he's proven that time and time again. I don't think Billy is in that class of play calling head coach to where it's like a real benefit to the team by having him do it. I think this program would be best served if it's keeping Billy in 2025, as they're currently sort of posturing is going to be the case. I think getting an offensive coordinator would be a beneficial thing. But with that being said, I don't think it's the biggest problem this team has right now, especially when DJ Lagway's healthy, because he at least opens up a deep element of the passing game that didn't really exist with Graham Mertz. Because I think with Graham Mertz, and this isn't even a shot at Graham Mertz, but the 4 plays thing, that's kind of true, because they were exclusively running screens and hitches for the most part. And I think when Lagway took over, that opened up things in the deep game that they didn't have before. Now, granted, I think the Kentucky stat line that DJ had, I think, kind of proved why Billy needs to tweak this offense more, because having 7 completions for 250 something yards, I mean, you got to be throwing the ball more than that if you're having that kind of success. So I think I have a lot of criticisms about Billy's offense, but I don't think it's this team is a better offensive scheme away from being really good right now. I think it's deeper than that.
After the Miami game, the offense was horrible against Miami. I analyzed that game more than I have others, and I went that drive by drive, play by play in the offense. One thing I noticed with Billy's offense, it kind of requires perfection. If you just have one player miss a blocking assignment, there were 2 different plays where you have 4 offensive linemen who do their job is make their block. And then there's just one guy who will miss a linebacker, and that could have been a touchdown. Now it's not. And when you had a guy like Mertz in there, if you don't have someone who can make a miraculous play, then having that one guy miss his play is just going to ruin everything. And now we have Aiden Warner in there who, again, you said earlier, you don't want to really tag too much on him. I mean, you can't really blame him. He's just out there doing what he can do, his best work at possible. And you do have Lagway in there who, say that your receivers don't do their job well enough, he can still scramble out and make those big plays and get 10, 15, 20 yards where neither of these other guys can. I mean, Rob, exactly. If we want to get a little bit on the brighter side, at least talking about Miami, they did lose today.
Yep, they did.
So there is a little bit of hope there. I mean, FSU, also a huge underdog today to Notre Dame. So if we're having a bad day, at least our rivals are as well. Makes today a little bit better. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, especially the way Miami lost, because this team has been skating by the absolute luck, or just being, in the case of the Virginia Tech and Cal games, kind of straight up being handed the win by officiating. They have been very fortunate to not lose a game to this point. So then to lose a game where you go for it on 4th and 16, I think it was.
Yes.
And then not get it. I mean, obviously cutting the game to 9 doesn't like really help you there.
Yeah.
But 4th and 16 is just so low percentage. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously losing the game on a strip sack. I mean, just the luck ran out. And it doesn't end their season, but
No.
I think you pretty much gotta. I mean, they are not getting into. I don't think they're getting into the college football playoff without winning the ACC championship at this point. I think assuming they were to like get there at 11-1 and lose, I think that's it for them. I don't think they're getting into the dance.
Do you think they end up winning the ACC championship?
Well, I would have probably said no, but Clemson's currently struggling a little bit with Virginia Tech, so we'll see. I mean, SMU, I'm impressed. They've had a pretty fortunate ACC schedule. You know what I mean? Like it hasn't. They've managed to avoid, other than Pitt, playing the better teams in the league. But we'll see. I'm certainly not incredibly impressed with Miami. And the Cam Ward magic sort of ran out today.
All I'm gonna say there is, Ashton Jeanty wouldn't fumble in that situation. Cam Ward did.
Yeah.
Ashton Jeanty for Heisman?
I mean, you don't have to convince me, man. You do not have to convince me on the Ashton Jeanty Heisman bandwagon.
I want to get more into the offense a bit. With Lagway probably returning, the run game is also still going to open up more. So we still rush for 200 yards with Warner, and that's what Texas was doing. We could run for a ton of yards on LSU. I mean, this LSU defense still... We saw Marcel Reed go and torch that LSU defense when he came in there. So what are we going to think? What do we think Lagway is going to be at? 90, 95% going into next week?
Yeah, I mean, you would think, like, I feel like a hamstring can just be weird in terms of just the lingering aspects of it. But I mean, if he was a real game time decision today, like that was real, like he was actually warming up with a chance to play, I don't see how he's not at least pretty close to good to go on Saturday. Granted, I don't think, I think you probably, especially now that we've seen what it looks like without him, I think you probably should be advising him to not try to be, running around quite as much as he was before. Though it is part of his game. He's not quite Marcel Reed levels of just gonna, outrun you. And because LSU can't stop mobile quarterbacks. So I'm not quite sure I classify DJ under the mobile. Like, he's a quarterback who can move. I'm not sure I'd say he's like a mobile quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be designing a lot of runs with DJ.
I don't really want to make a comparison to Tim Tebow, but he's still a big physical runner who has decent enough speed. I mean, I
think short yardage, if anything, if you're going to do anything with DJ, it's like that. Yeah, I think he's Tebow-esque in that way, I would say. Just because he's 6'4", 245 or something like that. He's a big dude.
That sounds right. I think so. So I want to get into Billy Napier's future here. How long do you think he will be here for?
Man, it's really hard. It's just I hate to give a cop out here. There's so much that's in question right now at a university level. Like, I think if Scott Strickland is staying, if Scott Strickland's exit's not imminent, I kind of believe him when he says that Billy's going to come back in 2025. I still need to see. I mean, I think this could get pretty ugly here these next couple weeks, depending on the health of Lagway. But even then, we'll see. I mean, if the defense can get back to full health, maybe. But I think these two games to LSU and Ole Miss could be pretty rough. Now, you got to beat FSU. I think if you lose that FSU game, even if it's not Lagway for whatever reason, I think all bets are kind of off at that point. If you lose to a 2-9 FSU team, which is what they in all likelihood will be going into that game. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine Billy gets to stick around if they go 4-8 or 5-7. But it's like, who's going to fire him? Is it Scott, who his whole situation's currently in jeopardy, and SEC athletic directors don't typically get to make a third coaching hire? Is it interim president Kent Fox? Like, I don't know. I don't know.
And also with the basketball stuff, if they have to hire a new basketball coach, are they going to want to be looking for a new basketball coach and new football coach at the same time again?
Yeah. I mean, and with the backdrop of the House settlement potentially, and the fact that schools are prepared. I mean, we don't know how that's all going to shake up. None of that's been finalized, but schools are preparing to have to budget out like $20 million extra for paying players next year. So I think that's going to factor into the decision heavily. And it's why it's not just at Florida, guys. I mean, there's other schools that are in similar situations that are slow to the jump to make a move because there's just a lot of external factors, and Florida has even more just with everything that we've talked about that's going on, at the university level.
Rob brought up a point in the chat. So he says, put it on screen, Billy doesn't ever take advantage of matchups. His offense is execution based.
Yeah, I'd mostly agree with that.
I think it's also a bigger worry on defense. We see it with like fast-paced offenses, like we played against Miami, or when A&M's a little bit different because nobody thought Connor Weekman was going to be out until it started even coming up on that Thursday before the game.
Yeah.
So you maybe get a little past there.
Well, and it's such a different game you're preparing for when you're playing Marcel Reed versus Connor Weigman. Like, if that truly catches you off guard, yeah, that's a bad situation to find yourself in.
Absolutely is. And you still bring up, do we really have a better defense, or have we been playing worse offenses? I mean, when we go to play LSU, that's probably going to be a perfect prime time example of is it better or is it worse? Because this is going to be an offense that likes to do quick plays. And when you look back at when we've struggled, it's been against quick plays. There were, I think I saw in the fourth quarter, 20 plus missed tackles on this defense. That's just something that we can't tolerate for next week, really ever at the University of Florida.
Yeah. And I hate to just keep like going back to it, but I just think the health of those guys in the secondary is just so crucial because I don't think today has to be like even though I stand more in the I don't think Billy's going to get this figured out. I don't think today has to be like a complete indictment of everything he's built because of everything you were missing. But again, and if you're not going to get those guys back, like if you're in the camp that wants Billy fired, I don't think it's going to happen if you just stay this injured the rest of the year and get demolished in these games. Like I don't think, given everything that's going on, they're going to hold that against him, whether they should or not. I'm not even saying they shouldn't, because ultimately it's year 3, and the fact that even with this schedule, bowl eligibility looks like an uphill climb in year 3. Like that's a problem. Like no doubt about it. That's a problem.
So I've kind of been going into this game, I was firmly on I'm okay with keeping Billy because I could see a world where next year this team is possibly making a playoff run or a run for the playoffs. But after watching this game, I mean, how many times do you see a team lose a game this bad and then that season or the season next going to end up, because if we're going to make the playoffs next year, we're probably going to have to win 3 or 4 top 25 matchups, if not more. And if this is how you look, I know there's all the injuries, but that's where I get confused at, because I don't know if the team also, we have to worry about the transfer portal, because we saw the defense. It looked like they quit in that second half. Are they just quit for the second half of this game, or are they quit for the rest of the season? Because if they're quit for the rest of the season, that's when you have to start worry about, okay, well, now you have like Cameron James entering the portal. Now you have George Gums entering the portal, to the point to where it's like, okay, I know we talked about Pete Nankos reported that we're going to be using a ton of money to get to acquire talent from the portal. At that point, it's like we're just going to have to replace our entire team, and it's going into year 4, and you could just do that with a new coach too.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the potential disaster situation for Billy, is that they keep him around with the idea that you're going to be able to keep this core of young players that you've kind of developed around, like not just Lagway, but all these guys that are playing pretty well, Shamar James and Pup, guys like that. Like, I think that the problem is, like, I don't know if that guarantees that those guys aren't just going to leave, because at the end of the day, I don't know if I feel like Florida's poised to compete for a playoff spot next year, even with these guys healthy and even with DJ taking probably another step forward from where he is now, which I think is already pretty good for a true freshman, obviously.
Absolutely.
I just, if you lose those guys, like, that's an absolute disaster, because you've kept Billy Napier and now that core is gone. I mean, I think these guys seem to be, like, haven't given up on him or checked out on the program. Like, I don't get that sense. I think today they got just straight up outplayed. Just like flat out. I don't think it was an effort thing. Elements of this team have already quit. Yeah, I mean, Trey Wilson had surgery and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm not sure who you're referring to specifically. I mean, perhaps
Elijah Badger.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't want to speculate on injuries and stuff, but I mean, you'll see. I mean, I don't think Badger has eligibility anymore anyway, right? Badger's gone after this year, no matter what. Yeah. So, I mean, do you feel like, I mean, looking at what you saw today, like, and keeping in mind, like, the way this team at fullish strength got manhandled by Miami and Texas A&M and lost a winnable game to Tennessee, like, they lost. I don't think they didn't have enough talent to beat Tennessee. I think they squandered a winnable game against Tennessee. Do you think a load of transfers, when we've seen that it doesn't always work out perfectly? Like, even Ole Miss has had their fair share of problems with an elite portal class. FSU's was a complete bust, obviously. But even when it works out, it isn't always just a cure-all for everything. Like, how confident do you feel that Billy is just a group of experienced portal guys away from getting this thing to, like, where it not decent, but where it needs to be in year 4 at the University of Florida?
Well, so going into this game, the last 4 games had been really good. So I was kind of at the point where there was an obvious turn. Like, it looked like the defense, not just from the fact that we're holding teams to not many points. You just looked at them. It looked like they were playing hard. You saw players like Jack Pyburn getting more playing time. So I was at the feel that, okay, well, we lose that Tennessee game still. So I was kind of putting those other games, the Miami and A&M game, on a back burner, as it was like, okay, I know it's year 3 and that might not be the Gator standard, but if he hasn't figured out now, I'm willing to give him next year. And you look at that Tennessee game, we still should have won that game. But then you look, okay, every coach also loses games. Because, like, Dan Lanning last year for Oregon, he lost both of those Washington games. I mean, he had some dumb decision-makings, not kicking field goals, and those kind of lost him. So it's like, maybe I can give him that Tennessee game. You also looked at it. Graham Mertz got hurt there. I mean, having to throw the QB Lagway in there, like, Lagway was getting every couple drives still. But that's just an environment, 101,000 people all screaming at the top of their lungs. I was willing to give him that loss. And then I was willing to give him some losses to end the year based off the roster being so hurt. But I was hoping those would be 2 scores at least, maybe 3 in, like, a backdoor cover or something like that. But this loss, really, I don't know how to look at it, because I still see a lot of what I've said true, because the roster still is really injured. But I also feel like, when do you see a coach who wins 9, 10 games next year? As I said earlier, when do you see a coach that can do that and end up losing a game this big?
Yeah. And, it's not even this week, because, like, when I think about the Billy Napier era, like, this week, when the statement comes out and it's looking like there's a decent chance he's coming back in 2025, when I'm, like, sort of trying to talk myself into, like, how can this maybe work out? Like, how will this maybe be, be fine? Trying to, like, be optimistic about Billy Napier riding this ship. The 3 games that I consistently go back to in my mind are Tennessee this year and Missouri and Arkansas last year. Those are 3 games that just frankly had absolutely no business losing. You know, an Arkansas team that was 4-8, a Missouri team that was really good, and you had them beat, and you just let them get behind you on 4th and 21. How does that happen? And then the Tennessee game, where it's a game that goes to overtime and you leave 3 points on the board at the half because you have to run a fire drill field goal and there's 12 men on the field. Like,
yep.
And I think we look, even though the record wouldn't be good if that's all that goes different, I think we're looking at the Billy Napier era a lot differently if those two games go differently, because you ultimately go 7-5 last year. You come into this year with, it's not non-existent momentum coming into a year with a tough schedule. And if you win the Tennessee game, I could be talked into it. You know, that we're struggling with all these guys hurt. If you're like, well, he went and beat Tennessee and Knoxville, I'd be like, okay, that's something you could point at in a game where DJ had to come in due to injury, but he didn't win that game and he didn't win the other games last year. And that's kind of where it leaves me. It's just like, what am I supposed to look to as the positive vision? His record against Power 5 teams is what it is. His record in home games is what it is. And it's just, none of it's where it needs to be.
Well, that's where I was in the camp of, I want to wait and see these next 4 games. I mean, you're off to a horrible start. This is probably as bad of a start you could have been. So where it's like, okay, convince me that this season's a dud because of these injuries, and that next year you can go make that playoff run.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of now at the point to where I don't know if we can keep up with LSU. Even if we do keep it close next week with LSU, I need to see us win that game. I mean, I really need to see us do it against Ole Miss too. And then, I mean, FSU, if we find a way to lose to FSU, there's zero. I'm done with Billy. I don't care if we beat like one of the Ole Miss or LSU. If we lose to FSU this year, I think you have to be done with Billy. I don't see how you can move on with him if you lose that game. I mean, it's just unexcusable right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if if they really go all in and come out and say we're sticking with Billy in 2025, if he loses that game, I think that changes everything. I mean, if you lose to an FSU team that's just in the worst season they've had in their modern history, like, there's nothing else to say at that point. It's just, and Rob has a comment like about the quarterbacks. Like, yeah, I think, you know, pull it up. Yeah, I mean, I think there's truth to that. I think, you know, I don't want to say those changes were nothing, because I think the defense was truly really bad for a lot of the early parts of the year. And
it was,
you know, you could say Georgia's a bad quarterback, and I think maybe that's true. I think Carson Beck is playing like a limiting factor right now, but that's still a really good team up front in terms of the offensive line. That's a team with talent at the running back and receiver positions. Like, that is still an offense with NFL talent on it, as was the offense today. So, I mean, yeah, like Kentucky and UCF, I'll grant you that. Those are pretty abysmal offenses. And I didn't read too much into playing well against them, but
I also didn't really read too much into playing well against them. I did read that we didn't just play well against them. We did what good teams are supposed to do against them. I mean, we did better than what Georgia did against Kentucky.
Yeah.
Iowa State might not even be good anymore. So they're getting blown out by Kansas.
Oh, boy. Oh, I did not see that score. Wow.
Yeah. What is it? It was like 28-10 last time I saw.
31-10 now.
What a collapse from Iowa State. But I think you also have to look at the recruiting class, because really all that matters right now is the future. Because this season, I mean, you can make a bowl game and build some momentum for the team, but there's people who, even if you go 6-6, I mean, and rightfully so, there's people that are done with Billy in this regime. But you look at the recruiting class, it's 51st. That's obviously not going to be what it's going to be at the end of the year. I think it's still going to end up being top 25, top 20, maybe if we're lucky, top 15. I wonder if this game halts any of that recruiting momentum. Because you saw us look at Tramel Jones. He's getting projections to flip to Florida. A QB for FSU. Which, hey, now we finally go get some backup QBs. So, Stephon Shivers. I mean, I saw a picture of him. I was trying to pull it up on here, but I'm not sure how. This kid, he's a 3-star nose tackle. He just decommitted from Georgia. Is 2 visits scheduled for Florida. I mean, this kid looks like a monster. But this loss and the future losses, does that really impact the class? Do you think it's going to make this recruiting class worse than what it would be if we kept these games close?
I think it certainly could. Yeah, I think you have to find some way. I mean, I think obviously putting out a statement that seems to be committing to sticking with Billy, I think probably helps a little bit, just because it alleviates some of the uncertainty, like in the short term. But I mean, my concern is that, if you don't show momentum, you're still not going to recapture that momentum on the trail. And also, I mean, if that report from Pete Nakos is true about really going all in on the transfer portal, like they might just be frankly like punting on this recruiting class, at least outside of Vernell Brown. Like, I mean, I think they might just be, because NIL ultimately not an unlimited resource. I think maybe they're just going all in on the transfer portal. But I mean, currently is it still 51st, the recruiting class?
Should be. We haven't gotten anybody at this moment.
Yeah.
I mean, we have Rob saying just go get Lane. I just don't know if getting Lane is the solution right now.
Frankly, I would take Lane over what we have right now. I don't know if he's the best option. He was certainly my favorite option, like coming into the season. Would kind of like to see how they finish this year up before I'm like all in on Lane.
Ole Miss is up 16-7. 2-minute.
Are they
warning.
actually?
2-minute timeout.
Okay, well, Rob, Lane is growing on me as we speak, so we'll see what happens there.
I was kind of not fully out on Lane. Like, I don't think he has a championship style of offense or a championship style of team. But I mean, you're right, kind of at the point you said earlier. I just want to see us win some football games. I want to see us be competitive with great teams. I want to see us make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 15 years of largely being irrelevant with a few exceptions here and there. But for the most part, just not even relevant in the national picture. And I'm sick of it. I'm just tired of that being the case.
It's tough. I mean, going to all these games, spending all this money on the university. I mean, now we can get players for teams. I got a DJ Lagway jersey on. I mean, let's say we fire Napier and Lagway leaves. That's a waste of money. I mean, because now that player's not even part of your team. It ditched your team. And, I mean, we got Rob saying all Billy has to do is show something or win the next 2 games. Recruiting will be fine. I mean, yeah. Because I think if he can win the next 3 games, adding FSU there, I think recruiting will be as fine as it can be. And then you talk about what Nico said, just going all in on the portal. When you look at this team, what are we going to need in the portal next year is also a big question, because who's going to be available in the portal? Because that's a big unknown. I mean, you look at 2 receivers in DK and Badger, they're both going to be gone. I do trust Billy with getting receivers. I mean, we saw it with Ricky Pearsall. We saw it with Badger and DK. Aiden Mizell's looking really good. A couple freshmen. And Vernell Brown coming in. I trust him there. We do have a couple. We probably are going to lose at least 3 of our 4 starting offensive linemen. I do think we have been underrated how our O-line talent acquisition has been. Because since he's been here, it's not the Gator standard. It's not like Miami or Georgia levels. I mean, we've brought in some 4 stars. We brought in Roderick Kearney. We brought in Marcus Maskell. We brought in Fletcher Westfall, Caden Jones, and Jason Zandamela. I mean, I feel like these are more than what Mullen was bringing in, which Mullen's a low bar. But it's guys I could definitely see being SEC caliber offensive linemen. So maybe you go in the portal and snag 1 or 2 of those guys, or 2 more guys, some veterans. But then it really just depends on if players also leave.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And I mean, I think the offensive line, like you said, they're getting some guys, and they've had. I mean, I don't think the development's been incredible, but it's not been like disastrous either. Like I think the unit's taken a step forward all in all this year. I would say. I think, granted, is it what you expect when you have 2 offensive line coaches on staff? I don't know about that. But yeah, I mean, I think landing a couple portal offensive linemen, I think you pretty clearly, even though I think like some young players there, I think you pretty clearly need help in the secondary just because the depth is not where it needs to be right now. But yeah, I mean, you're going to need maybe a receiver to, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of areas that you could look to shore up. I don't know if you can patchwork this team into being a championship contender next year.
Rob's saying we keep lowering the bar for Sunbelt Billy, and he always underperform. All he has to do is lose to Texas within 21 points, and he couldn't even do that. He is terrible. I also wonder how different is losing to Texas by 21 versus 31 points. Is how much we lost by? I think it was 32 points.
I think giving up 49 is pretty bad. Like, I think that is the bigger problem, to be honest with you.
Got Trader one up. The talent is not coming to Florida. I mean, I still think Florida is still a elite level destination for recruits. I mean, we are in the state of Florida. There's so many players want to come home. And we still are going to be ponying up a lot of money. And really, if you're just a one-year player and Billy can sell you on that one-year message and they're offering you the money, I still think the talent will come to Florida as long as we don't fumble getting that talent from the coaching staff perspective.
I think you'll get talent. Like, I think you'll 100%, if they make their entire focus in NIL getting a portal class, they'll get probably a portal class that ranks pretty close to the top. But I do think it is a concern that, you're staking so much in the portal. Like, you're really letting it all come down to the portal. And you're not the only one that's going to be looking to do that. I mean, Ole Miss is going to have to probably do it again if Lane stays. Ohio State did that last year. They portal pretty heavily. Alabama did. Like, a lot of programs are doing that. So what happens if you go into the portal period trying to spend big and it just doesn't work out for you, and you whiff on some guys, and then all of a sudden you didn't quite upgrade the roster to the extent that you were hoping to?
Yeah, and I mean, people are going to look at FSU and say portaling doesn't work. Now, whether that's just them hating on Billy or whether they actually just look at FSU as the only example and say, oh, well, they're about to go 2-10 and it's not going to work. It's not that simple. Because, I mean, we're still bringing in our own recruits and developing our own guys like Lagway, like Ball, Jackson, plenty of guys in the defense. So I don't think we have to get a ton of talent. We just need to get like 1-2 year guys. I mean, like a Caleb Banks, he's going to be here. I don't know if he'll be here next year, but that's still a 2-year guy who was a great run stopper. Brought him in. Maybe not a championship level guy, but an improvement from that type of player to where now you're looking at a playoff roster.
And I would also say that FSU kind of illustrates like the extremes of the good and bad of the transfer portal era.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can say they proved why it doesn't work, but it worked good enough for them to go 13-0 in the regular season last year. It just, you go heavy on the portal one year, it works out, you got a good year, and then those guys leave, you got to do it again, and you have a whiff on a class, and that's kind of what happened this year. Now, granted, their internal development of high school guys has not been where it needs to be either, and that's probably the bigger problem than the portal's whiffing. But I think I wouldn't say FSU is a sign that the portal doesn't work. I think FSU is a cautionary tale of being overly reliant on the portal because it just is kind of unpredictable. Guys that you think, I mean, Joey Slackman was one of the highest rated transfers in the entire portal class this past offseason, and he's been pretty much MIA for the Gators. He got beat out season
by Tyburn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. If Cam Ward had gone to FSU, or I would say, like on the reverse side, Miami was one Cam Ward decision to go to the NFL draft away from being in a pretty bad spot this season because of where the quarterback position was,
But then you also look at the schedule because it's not just how we are as a team, it's also who we play. I mean, Miami's going to be losing Cam Ward. Georgia's going to be losing Carson Beck. Texas is going to be losing Quinn Ewers. Let's see, Tennessee with Nico is going to be interesting. Kentucky, they're going to be interesting. Texas A&M, they're probably going to go into portal for some QB. So if those like Texas and Georgia and Miami, if they're looking for QBs, they're also going to be looking against Texas A&M. We don't know what we're going to be looking at with FSU next year. I mean, FSU's in a really weird spot, man, because they haven't been developing it. And you saw with like Marvin Jones Jr., they went for a younger guy out of the portal too, so it's kind of like a recruit of their own, but they didn't develop him as well as they should have. Because I think that's a big difference between us and them. You can point to our guys and saying, oh, they're developing. I mean, on the trenches, like Kanjaya Harris, I've liked what I've seen from him. I've liked what I've seen from Bryce Levette. On the defense, I mean, one guy who really stood out to me, Mekhi Burrow, true freshman nose tackle. I mean, when Jamari Lyons was announced hurt for the year and Burrow was taking a ton of snaps, I honestly thought that it was going to be kind of bad at that position. I feel like he's definitely stood out more than really anyone could have projected.
Yeah, which is why I don't think the case against Billy, even though I lean more toward the, like, I think Florida needs to move on. I don't think the case against him is entirely cut and dry, because you don't have to look that closely to see reasons to be optimistic. Like, a lot of these guys they brought in are playing well. You know, I think you've got young guys all over the defense that were making plays, you know, when the defense was healthy. You know, you've got, I think, guys like Aiden Mizell starting to emerge as playmakers. You know, the running back room looks really, really good. You know,
it does.
This running back room, when it's healthy, is talented. I just, I don't know. I think the potential is there. Like, you can see that there is development going on, and that they are bringing in guys that seem to fit the culture and ideas of this program. It's just not really panning out into wins right now.
It also doesn't help that on College Game Day this morning, Nick Saban came out and kind of said the inverse of what he said a month ago about Billy, where now he was hyping up the culture, and you can see the improvement from this team. And it kind of just makes us look more like clowns. Go out and lose by 32 to Texas. I mean, I got Rob here. You guys are focusing on the players. The problem is Napier will still be the head coach. I mean, maybe it is. But, I mean, maybe you bring in a new coach, and maybe they don't bring the players here. And then you still – because if we fire Napier, you're looking at the $26 million buyout just for Napier. Then you're looking at the rest of the staff, which largest staff in conference or in college football, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a couple $1 million in buyout, or I don't know how much they will cost in buyouts.
I think it's estimated. I think I saw somewhere this week, like, estimated around $40 million all told in buyouts, plus whatever you got to pay a new coach. So
okay, and then depending on the coach you get, some coaches have different buyout levels just from their program. I know after last season, before Jed Fish took the job at Washington, he was here under Steve Spurrier, so a lot of people were looking at him as, if Billy doesn't do well, he would come here. But I know Jed Fish, he has a buyout at Washington of $7 million this year, just for us to buy him out, not even for Washington to fire him. So you're looking.
I will say Lane's buyout is low. Lane, that is the one of the things Lane has going for him, because of the state contracts in Mississippi. They're limited on, I think, term length and salary too. I believe there's state laws in Mississippi about that. So if you want to get someone cheap who would probably be available or before the playoffs, it's probably got to be Lane Kiffin.
Talent wins games. I mean, does it? We saw Texas A&M with Jimbo Fisher have one of the most talented rosters in the country win 6 games last year. 7 games, I can't remember. Coach don't score. I'm not sure what he means by that. But
like
talent
saying,
doesn't.
Like, it's not Billy's responsibility. Like, Billy's not the one who scores touchdowns. So
it is his responsibility, though, to scheme up the plays to score those touchdowns.
And also he can hamper it. Like, he can get in the way of it and cost you points, like he did in the Tennessee game, like I talked about earlier.
Absolutely can. Is this true what I just saw? Oh, Todd Golden released a statement.
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna read this quietly before I say anything out loud.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, he didn't really say anything. He was kind of just saying he talked to a lawyer and they advised me to not saying anything, and
if you're expecting anyone to say anything, just know like they can't comment on ongoing Title IX stuff. So the absolute most you're gonna get is like a statement from the athletic department acknowledging that there's an investigation, and that's all they're gonna say.
And yeah, that's just what Todd Golden said.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much you watch the basketball program or watch the basketball team.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Okay. I don't want to say it like that. That's such a bad thing to say. How do I word this? If this ends up being true, it results in Golden being fired.
Yeah.
Probably also results in Strickland being fired.
Hard to imagine. Yeah, hard to imagine.
Another scandal.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like 5 other scandals I can name off the top of my head with him. And the fact that he may have known about it before it was reported. I mean, does that benefit the program overall? Because I know, as you said, you can't make 3 coaching hires in the SEC.
Yeah, you would think.
You look at LSU, they hired Scott Woodyard. He came in, and then he brought in Brian Kelly, big coaching hire. Their baseball team, they went and hired Jay Johnson from Arizona. Yeah. And then in year 1, they won the national championship.
Also brought in Kim Mulkey.
Yes, they also brought in Kim Mulkey.
Yeah.
I mean, their basketball team hasn't been as good, but I mean, their basketball program was also in maybe the worst in SEC history after what was his Will Wade, what he did there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely, I mean, I think basketball program obviously has some momentum right now, it seems. I mean, I don't know what is the best for the long term for the athletic department, but I do think that I would say it seems pretty likely that if this investigation wraps up and it's confirms what we've heard is true, that it probably means the end for both Golden and Strickland. I would think.
I mean, yeah, Tennessee, they had to, after their thing with the McDonald's bags and everything, everybody got fired, and now it's looking good for them. I mean, they already had their basketball coach, but
yeah, I mean, they're a revenue machine. Like they've got all these ads on the field and stuff, and partnerships that they're doing. They're bringing in revenue. I mean, their NIL from whatever. I mean, it's hard to tell from the outside because we just don't really know. But it seems like they really have their stuff together when it comes to the collective. I'm not sure if Florida's there right now. I don't think so either. I don't think it's a bad NIL situation.
No.
I think it's probably been overstated a little bit in the past year that we have NIL problems, but I don't think it's up to par with where it needs to be compared to SEC rivals. I think that's for sure.
I don't think it's the fact that it's bad. I think we're just behind because what I've heard is that the past couple of years, or the first year or so, they kind of more want to be hesitant on it. They kind of wanted to keep it a little old school.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one big reason that a lot of people didn't want Lane Kiffin here originally after we fired Mullen, or because there were some old school beliefs that Kiffin wouldn't work here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I don't know if you can look at the NIL and say that's the problem. That's my point. AD needs to get the AD revenue. Scott Strickland, the reason he's still here is because he's actually made the program a lot of money. I know that's why boosters really like him. They're still selling out like every single football game. Baseball team's still making money, and basketball team as well. I know he's really good at fundraising, but it hasn't been for NIL. It's just been for other things, which how much does that help us?
NIL, I mean, we might be months away from NIL being kind of obsolete in terms of being the main way through which players are compensated. So we really still are entering kind of a new world still that we don't exactly know what it's going to take at an institutional level to win. I mean, obviously monetary investment across the board, you need that, but in terms of the specifics and how you're going to get that money, it's a little unclear right now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I have anything else to say on the team. I mean, that was just a really bad loss today. I mean, I'll turn to you if you have anything to say.
Yeah, I'll finish with some closing thoughts. I mean, I think today was worse than obviously I hoped it would be, but I think it's hard to be stunned that it played out like this. You knew that without I mean, we saw enough of Aiden Warner, last week to know that this just is not credible offensive football when he's in the game. I mean, I don't think it necessarily has to mean that they're going to get clobbered in these games to close out the year. I think you have an opportunity to get healthy and win a couple games. And, I think I'm not sure it would change the way I feel about Billy Napier, but if you can find a way to win 2 of these last 3 and get to a bowl game, it certainly feels like you avoided what could have been a really disastrous season with the schedule and the injuries and stuff. And I think there's at least something there. But as we stand right now, it's hard to be very optimistic. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat things. We just watched one of the worst SEC losses in program history. A program that in a perfect world, Florida should be measuring itself up against, and we're not even close right now. I don't know if that's ever going to change under Billy Napier. And I think there's enough uncertainty right now that I would just say, like, anyone who's stressed out or worried about it right now, just like hold tight, because I think there's a lot of ways that this could play out these next few weeks down the stretch.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, I'm going to make sure everyone liked the video. Your likes are huge for us. They can help push out the channel. You can find me at TWhitForGator on Twitter. Tyler, if you want to.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Tyler Natuno, just my name, no spaces.
Anything else you want to say where you're at? Or
yeah, if you want to read some more of my work on College Sports Wire or over in For the Win, I'm a contributor there too. We'll probably have something up this week in College Sports Wire about my thoughts, kind of going a little bit more in depth on some of the things I've said here about the Billy Napier era. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. Keep an eye out for that. Probably coming in the next couple of days.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. We will be live tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time with our LSU predictions. We were Tyler and Tyler. We will see you guys tomorrow.